All right, I want to introduce you guys to a pretty new and I think very innovative and very simple approach to injury and training. And they're calling it the training injury paradox. So, athletes accustomed to high training loads have fewer injuries than athletes training at lower workloads, which is interesting. Injury may not be caused by high loading, but by inappropriate loading. Okay, so this is key. So we always think that if you're injured, maybe you need some rest days, but maybe you just didn't train well enough. So again, this is very common sense. You didn't train at a high enough load before performance, game day, etc., or just before you increase your training load. And so it's not that the loading was too high, but that it was inappropriate. And so they're identifying a sweet spot. So overtraining is due to high training loads that can lead to injury, but undertraining, these low training loads, can leave an athlete vulnerable to injury. And so you don't want to overtrain it and you don't want to undertrain. And so a researcher named Tim Gabbett is writing a lot of stuff on this concept. He is Australian. Many papers, and one I linked to on Blackboard. And so here's something from one of his concepts so here's loading, training loads, low, high. And so you might get higher injuries when your team fitness is down and your team performance is not optimal. So this is not an optimal situation. At higher loads, the injuries go up, the fitness may go down, and the performance may go down, right? And so you want to get into this optimal, so where injuries are kind of at a lull or a low point, your fitness levels are relatively high, and your performance is high. So how do we do this? How do we monitor an athlete? The key is that you give them external loads, right? You give them a training program, physical work to do, distances run, weights lifted, number of sprints, number of jumps, but you need to monitor their internal load, so how they are responding to that external load. And so you can either do this as a physiologic response or a perceptual response. And so the Gabbett's group has been starting to use ratings of perceived exertion. So most of you guys have heard about RPE, and it is somewhat correlated to increases or how your heart rate responds to certain activities, right? So you can monitor your heart rate to figure out how your physiology is responding internally to this external loading, or you could say, I feel good today, I feel bad today, right? So I've had the experience of running a 3-mile loop. I could have a difference of over 3 minutes over that 3 miles. Some days I feel great, some days I feel horrible. Same external load, but my internal loads is vastly different. So how do we quantify this? So they've suggested something called exertional minutes, and it's RPE times session duration in minutes. So if an individual training dose was measured using the RPE 30 minutes following the training session. So the athletes record their RPE according to the category. So it's basically the 1 to 10 Borg scale. The RPE is then multiplied by the training duration in minutes, and it gives arbitrary units. And so you keep this training diary on a daily basis. And so I've been doing this with running, right? So after a run, if I run 30 minutes, I give my RPE and I have a exertional minutes. And then if I have a 60-minute run, I give that RPE. And I don't have graphs for this video, but I will post some graphs in class and show you how I've been using it. And so with these exertional minutes, you can kind of do something similar to this concept of injuries load greater than tolerance. But basically you're figuring out the balance between fatigue and fitness, right? If you're too fatigued, you'll probably get injured. If you're not fit enough, you will probably get injured. So injury is equal to fatigue over fitness. We define fatigue as the acute training loads. All right. What did you do today, or what level did you train over the last week? And so different papers use it in different ways. And Gabbett has been doing research on cricket players, rugby, I think some soccer clubs in the UK. And so it's kind of being tested for many types of athletes. So what I do is I think I do a 7-day acute training load. So what is my fatigue level based on 7 days of training? And then you also monitor your fitness or your chronic training loads. Not chronic in a bad way, just like your cumulative training up to that point of today. So it's usually a rolling average of the recent 3 to 6 weeks of your training. And so I did, I believe, 42 days rolling average, meaning today I would have the last 42 days as my fitness level. Tomorrow I would have the last 42 days, so I would delete the earliest training load and add tomorrow's. And then to kind of look at the potential of injury, you put acute over chronic. And if it's 1 or greater than 1, or I'm sorry, less than 1, you have a low injury prevalence, let's say. If it's greater than 1, higher injury. And they usually put it between, I think, 0.8 and 1.2 is kind of the sweet spot that you're looking for. Oh, it's pretty good. See, 0.8 to about 1.25. And so if you're too low, right, if you're acute chronic, meaning you're not trained well, you're not trained enough for what you're going to demand your body of, you could, the injury risk could go up. You have the sweet spot, which is where the likelihood of injury is pretty low. And then obviously as you go above 1.5, it's what they're calling the danger zone, and your increase of injury it goes up.